The reason why you think your line work sucks is because you're not using your arm properly and your lines are the same weight or thickness. So we're going to cover both of those issues in this video, and we're going to start with your arm before we move on to your weight. Line weight, that is. I'm not making a commentary on your diet. I'm sure you're beautiful. Let's move on, shall we? When we first start to draw, we tend to hold and use our pencil the same way we write, like this. We use our wrist and that's it. But the wrist is so limiting because it has a small range of motion. It's great for the little details in our drawings, but it's difficult to get those big swooping lines that we want, and that's where the elbow comes in. If we bring our elbow into the mix, we have a much wider arc to work with, which means you can now draw lines like this. See how that's more smooth and fluid? If you rest your elbow on your chair or desk, then you have this pivot point which you can move back and forward. A useful exercise is to get a blank piece of paper and try practicing parallel lines, keeping your wrist still and just using your elbow to move. It's going to feel weird as hell at first, but you'll start to get used to it. The elbow is pretty good, especially when you want to draw long straight lines, but to get the most out of our arm, we're going to want to introduce the shoulder. It has the greatest range of motion in your entire arm. You know those perfect circle videos? Most of those tend to use their shoulders because our shoulders can make big circular movements, which is great for drawing circles and ellipses. Likewise with the elbow exercise, loosen up your shoulder and draw lots of circles and ellipses. Now, I know what you're thinking. Your lines look even worse than they did before, but that's because this is a new thing. If you practice these movements a lot, then you'll start to gain more control over your pencil and make more confident lines. Unfortunately, that's just going to take time and practice. Do this for 10 to 15 minutes before you start your drawings, and you'll notice you'll make better marks on the page by utilizing all 3 points of your arm. And then you'll start doing it automatically without thinking. Another thing that I tend to do without thinking is not subscribe to YouTube channels, unless someone asks me to do it, otherwise I'll forget. So before you forget, hit that subscribe button, and now let's talk about your weight. The best way to explain this is to show you. If you look at this drawing, you might not notice that anything is wrong with it, but you'll really notice a difference when I apply weight to it. It just looks like it has more depth and form and is generally more interesting to look at. But why? Well, line weight serves a few purposes. Firstly, it makes the drawing pop, which makes it interesting, but it also provides information like perspective, weight, and light. If one object is in front of the other, then the lines that indicate that should be a little thicker because that helps show us that one form is overlapping the other. If you want to show an object weight, then thicken up the lines that are being affected by gravity, like this. And if you want to help show where a light source is hitting a subject, then make those lines thinner, almost translucent. So that's why you'd want to use line weight, but what does that look like in practice? Well, if you're new to this concept, then draw the way you would normally draw and don't think about line weight at all until you're finished. If you're working traditionally, then stick with pencil so that you can erase some lines if you need to. Let's apply weight to this drawing here. If you haven't noticed it already, you'll really see the difference line weight can have at the end. Most of the lines here are the same weight or thickness, but let's apply some of those lines in the area that overlap one another. Already we're starting to see some of the forms and shapes pop, and the drawing has more depth to it, but we can go further. I want to show that the dress is heavy and also the vines have a bit of weight to them too. We can do this by making the lines on the bottom thicker. There's not much heaviness going on here, but there is a great article that describes this really well that I'll link in the description. We've spoken about thick lines non-stop, but what about thin ones? I've applied some thin lines on the face, neck and torso to show this. This adds even more depth, and we can also use them for texture as well. So what if we were to add a background? This might take a while, so hold on while there we go. That took ages. Okay, so I think this looks okay, but I think the background is smothering her a little bit. She's not really popping much. So how can we solve that with lines? Well, we can do something like this. By increasing the thickness of the contour lines, it can help her stand out from the background. One more thing I didn't mention was light. For the most part, light is achieved by using values, but we can simulate light by using lines as well. By making some of those contour lines thinner, we are implying that the light source is hitting that side of the drawing, like this. It's subtle, but some of the lines on her left side are now thinner because that's where the light is coming from. As with everything to do with art, this is going to take some time and some experimentation. You may prefer adding more thicker lines or maybe fewer, and that's kind of up to you. It's up to you where you place them because you're expressing an opinion. Your opinion. And that's what art creation is all about. The way you use lines will depend on the drawing that you do and what you feel like doing. So experiment with various line weights and train your arm to draw them with smooth fluidity. It's one of the most fun parts of the drawing, and I hope this helped put line work into perspective a little bit. If you have any concerns, then let me know in the comments. Check out the links in the description, and as always, have fun drawing.